Laudetur Jesus Christus, Vatican and World News.
In the headlines this Saturday, May 22nd, Pope Francis meets with the President of the European Commission. The Pope also meets with people from Codogno, an Italian town which became the first epicenter of Europe's outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic last year. And humanitarian aid is arriving in Gaza after a ceasefire between Israeli and Palestinian militants came into effect. In the Vatican, I'm Francesca Merlo. On Saturday morning in the Vatican, Pope Francis met with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who spoke to Vatican News in an exclusive interview. During their private meeting, the two noted the good bilateral relations between the Holy See and the European Union and spoke of initiatives underway to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations. A statement by the Holy See press office also mentioned their discussions on human and social development issues affecting the continent, also in view of the recently launched conference on the future of Europe. Vatican News' Mario Galgano met up with Ursula von der Leyen and asked her a number of questions on these topics.
The relations between the Holy See, the Vatican and the European Union are excellent. And 50 years, this shows how much we are like-minded. It's basically, the good cooperation is basically based on sharing the same values. Working for peace, for the solidarity, for the dignity of the human being. These are shared values and more of them. And of course we are following very closely the grand topic of the Vatican, the globalization of solidarity, very close to our hearts, and we are very grateful for the interest of the Vatican in our conference on the future of Europe. So just a few topics that show how intense and how good the relations are.
How will the EU Commission continue its efforts to tackle the global health crisis?
Yes, we all know that nobody will be safe until everybody is safe, and all people must have access to affordable and safe and effective vaccines. And there are different routes you can choose. So the European Union, through all the difficulties we had in securing vaccines, stood to the principle that half of the European production is going to other countries. It's 90 different countries where European production is going to. That is one part. Of course, the second part is of utmost importance, COVAX. The European Union is one of the largest founder of COVAX. And indeed, yesterday we had a G20 summit where Team Europe pledged 100 million doses for COVAX. This is so important to pledge now doses in kind because the scarcity of the vaccines all over the place. But we had another success yesterday. Our industrial partners, BioNTech, Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson and Moderna, committed to deliver this year 1.3 billion doses of vaccines specifically for low-income countries as a non-profit and for middle-income countries to lower costs. Now, these are three routes: export, donations, and the industrial partners. On top comes a fourth topic, which is dear to my heart. Team Europe is now working together with our African partners to build up manufacturing capacities in Africa itself. This is not for the short term, but it's for the medium and long term. So we come with the technologies, with industrial partners, massive investment, but it's about also skilling personnel so that in the medium term, Africa is independent to produce its own vaccines.
How can and should Europe act in the search for sustainable and integral development? Because we know that things can change very soon.
Yeah, I'm deeply grateful for Laudato Si and the positive push it gave. So this overall call for protecting our planet, our nature and the climate. And the European Union was committed from the very beginning on. In my mandate, the first and most important topic I placed is the European Green Deal. The European Union will be the first continent to be climate neutral in 2050. And we have now the first ever European climate law. That is, we have not only goals, but put in law, we now step by step show how we want to reach climate neutrality and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions till 2030.
That was Ursula von der Leyen. Also this morning, Pope Francis received an audience, a delegation from the Ambrosoli Institute of Codogno, a northern Italian town of some 15,000 people, which became the first epicenter of Europe's outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic last year. With schools reopening after long months of lockdown and distance learning, students should avoid isolating themselves in the digital world and rebuild real relationships using the head, hands and the heart, the Pope told the students, as Robin Gomes reports.
Addressing the delegation from Ambrosoli Institute, Pope Francis pointed out that young people have a strength and desire which, when stimulated and accompanied with wisdom and passion by teachers, bears surprising fruits.
In particolare il vostro istituto mette in risalto il legame tra l'apprendere e il fare, tra lo studio e l'operatività, tra la testa e le mani.
The Pope said that the Ambrosoli Institute highlights the link between learning and doing, between studying and working, between the head and the hands. But what is missing is the third element, the heart. He said the head, the heart and hands are needed in order to be coherent. He said all the three must always interact in the school as they are connected in the person in the journey of life. The circle of the head, the heart and hands must always be kept open and dynamic, he said. Emerging from negative experiences of the lockdown, Pope Francis said one needs to rebuild real interpersonal relationships, shifting away from virtual relationships. While acknowledging the benefits of knowledge and communication that the digital world offers to young people, the Holy Father warned against the danger of closing in on ourselves. He wished that the experience of abstinence from friendship stimulate in them a great critical sense in the use of these instruments so that they may remain subject to our intelligence and will.
Non pensare di spostarsi per il futuro. Sarete futuro se siate il presente.
Pope Francis reminded the students that they are the present of society and they did not move to the future. They will be the future of society if they are its present. Without young people, he said, a society is almost dead. You are the present because you bring new life, the Pope said. I am Robin Gomes.
Catholics around the world are invited to take part in a vigil in the heart of the Holy Land to pray for peace in the troubled region. The event takes place at 4 p.m. Rome time on Saturday in the Church of St. Stephen. As Nathan Morley reports, humanitarian aid is arriving in Gaza after a ceasefire between Israeli and Palestinian militants came into effect.
Earlier in the day, lorries from various aid agencies started bringing medicine, food and fuel into Gaza after Israel reopened the Karim Shalom crossing. After over a week of hellish bombardments, thousands of Palestinians finally returned home to scenes of utter devastation. More than 100,000 people fled their homes in the territory last week. Gaza's housing ministry said 1,800 housing units were unfit for living and over 1,000 had been destroyed completely. Officials say reconstruction might take years. It will also take tens of millions of dollars to rebuild the already impoverished enclave. The World Health Organization, or WHO, called for the creation of corridors for injured people to be evacuated. More than 250 people were killed in the 11-day conflict, most of them in Gaza. In southern Israel, many residents celebrated the truce, but many expressed concern that another conflict in the region was just a matter of time away. The fighting between Israel and Palestinian militants in Gaza began on May the 10th after weeks of rising Israeli-Palestinian tension, which culminated in clashes at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the holy part of Jerusalem. Hamas began firing rockets after warning Israel to withdraw from the site, which triggered retaliatory airstrikes. The Israeli army said militants fired more than 4,300 rockets during the conflict, of which 90% were intercepted by its air defences. But some rockets still got through, slamming into homes, synagogues and other buildings in Israel. For Vatican Radio, this is Nathan Morley reporting.
And finally, pharmaceutical companies have agreed to deliver more than 1.3 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines to low and middle-income countries this year. The agreement came at a global health summit that underlined the growing disparity between rich and developing countries, as Stefan Boss reports.
The visibly satisfied Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi, host of the Rome summit that brought together the group of 20 of the world's largest economies and the European Union's executive arm, had a message to the international community. He called the coronavirus vaccine contributions by private companies significant and staggering. The pledges include 1 billion doses from American pharmaceutical company Pfizer and German firm BioNTech, 200 million from Johnson & Johnson and 100 million from Moderna. They say they will provide them at a cost price to low-income countries and a low profit for middle-income nations. Pfizer and BioNTech also pledged an additional 1 billion doses for 2022. At the same time, European Union nations promised another 100 million doses for this year. Prime Minister Draghi believes this will dramatically reduce the lack of COVID-19 vaccines globally.
On the private sector, commitments, pledges, these are very significant, and these companies, Pfizer, Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, are certainly have committed their whole reputation to this. It's a very, very important move that really will change the landscape, because if they keep on having these donations on this rhythm, many of the controversial questions on how we ensure production of vaccines in LDCs, how we make sure that patents are sort of used also to liberalize the use of vaccines, well, they're still very important, but they somehow are less important.
The EU's Executive European Commission says that many European deliveries will happen through the United Nations-backed COVAX program. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen believes the program ensures that potentially life-saving vaccines are not only available to rich nations.
Important is that this is a very clear no to health nationalism. And it is even reinforced if you look in the declaration. At a certain point you find the principle that supply chains have to be open. So clear no to export bans, a clear no to bottlenecks. And all the countries I was mentioning, the G20, have agreed on that.
However, the distribution of vaccines suffered a significant setback. Its biggest supplier, the Serum Institute of India, announced it would likely not export any more vaccines until the end of the year due to the COVID-19 crisis in that nation. But the meeting hosts expressed confidence that new pledges would be honored and that impoverished nations would finally receive the coronavirus vaccines they have been waiting for. They stressed the need is urgent. Italian Prime Minister Draghi said nearly 1.5 billion vaccine doses had been administered in over 180 countries worldwide. Yet only 0.3% were in low-income countries, while richer nations administered around 85%. For Vatican Radio, I am Stefan Bos, reporting.
And that brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. Many thanks go to Roberto Colangeli in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Francesca Merlo.